At 6, levelling up and a high-wage economy. Boris Johnson's message to the Conservative Party conference. The Prime Minister promised to remodel the economy and to promote opportunity across the UK.
That is the direction in which this country is going now, towards a high-wage, high-skill, high productivity and, yes, thereby a low-tax economy.
Also tonight, gas prices hit a record high, rising by almost 40% in a day as industry leaders call on the government for help. A historic medical milestone. Millions of children in Africa will be given a vaccine against malaria, which kills hundreds of thousands every year. The care worker who died in the Manchester Arena bombing after waiting almost an hour to be treated. The inquiry is he could have been saved. The ruler of Dubai ordered the hacking of his ex-wife's phone in a bitter custody battle over their children, says the High Court. And found in a Welsh quarry, scientists finally identify fossils of what's thought to be the oldest meat-eating dinosaur in the UK.
Coming up in Sports Day later in the hour on the BBC News channel, the Ashes tour should get the green light by the end of the week, but how strong a team will England have?
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Boris Johnson has closed the Conservative Party conference in Manchester with a promise to remodel the economy and promote opportunity across the UK. In a speech peppered with jokes, the Prime Minister spoke of building a high-wage economy with high productivity and low taxes and said he is committed to his levelling up agenda. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, reports from Manchester.
They waited from early. The yawn worth it for the faithful. The first self-described superfan there before dawn.
6 o'clock. Then me. And then this lady.
As one cabinet minister said, it is all about him. 5.5 hours later, the moment Boris Johnson has been waiting for more than 2 years.
Isn't it amazing to be back here in person?
The first time Conservatives have been cheek by jowl since beating Jeremy Corbyn.
We finally sent that corduroy communist cosmonaut into orbit, where he belongs.
Jokes aplenty. He used the spotlight to entertain as much as set out his ambition to change the country in ways he claims his predecessors weren't brave enough to do.
After decades of drift and dither, this reforming government, this can-do government, this government that got Brexit done, that's getting the COVID vaccine rollout done, is going to get social care done. And we are going to deal with the biggest underlying issues of our economy and society, the problems that no government has had the guts to tackle before.
There is some Tory discomfort about what the party's front row is doing, as families and firms face different pressures this autumn. But Boris Johnson's promising a new way for the country to do business, using the moment to remake an old argument.
The answer is to control immigration, to allow people of talent to come to this country, but not to use immigration as an excuse for failure to invest in people, in skills, and in the equipment, the facilities, the machinery.
Taxing, borrowing and spending right now are high, but he's trying to cast himself as an economic radical, stirring memories of Mrs. Thatcher.
She would have wagged her finger and said, more borrowing now is just higher interest rates and even higher taxes later.
He was cheered for low taxes one day, but the mission for now, levelling up, to make life just as good in every postcode, with extra cash for new science teachers in less well-off areas to help. But then he reminded his home crowd why his personal and the public's experience means more cash for the NHS.
The NHS saved me and our wonderful nurses pulled my chestnuts out of that Tartarian pit, and frontline care workers battled against a new disease selflessly, risking their lives, sacrificing their lives. And it is right that this party that has looked after the NHS for most of its history should be the one to rise to the challenge.
There were pleasers for this crowd too. A crackdown on protesters.
I say they're a confounded nuisance who are blocking ambulances, stopping people going about their daily lives. Pretty is taking new powers to insulate them snugly in prison where they belong.
Push back to calls for the country, for all of us, to reassess how we see ourselves.
And so we Conservatives will defend our history and cultural inheritance, not because we're proud of everything, but because trying to edit it now is as dishonest as a celebrity trying furtively to change his entry in Wikipedia. And it's a betrayal of our children's education.
Boris Johnson might have waited a long time to give this speech, but he seemed in a rush to make it.
But a country that is proud to be a trailblazer, to judge people not by where they come from, but by their spirit and by what is inside them. That is the spirit that is the same across this country in every town and village and city that can be found in the hearts and minds of kids growing up everywhere. And that is the spirit we are going to unleash.
His wife's verdict? You were really good. The ultimate judgment, of course, is yours.
After the agonies of Brexit and the perils of the pandemic, Boris Johnson wanted to use this week to turn to what's next. There could be hard times ahead, but his political dominance here is unchallenged. His party cast in his image now.
This party believes it's marching to a fifth term in office.
Oh, that was fantastic.
A leader in command.
Top draw, Laura, thank you.
Very positive, looking forward to the future.
Never short on ambition.
He can lead this country for 20 years.
But as the cabinet cars turn back for Westminster, they're speeding towards the country's problems. Optimism here is one thing, reality another. Looming political dangers wait at journey's end. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Manchester.
So how will Boris Johnson's promise of levelling up the economy resonate with voters and businesses? Our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth, has been to the marginal seat of Hastings to find out.
Hastings is a town of contrasts. Affluent areas sit alongside some of the country's most deprived. This community group offers practical support to local parents. Here, upbeat messages can feel a world away when higher bills are beckoning.
As you go, you're checking the prices, get to the till, and it's £15, £20 more a week.
Here there is real worry about how struggling families will cope with the loss of £20 a week in universal credit.
I fully understand that people should be aware that it was going to be taken away. It wasn't something that was going to be here forever, but there are a lot of parents that have relied on that very small amount of money.
Do you think the government gets it? Do you think it's going to help communities like yours?
We do it's really hard to get up in the morning at the minute for a lot of people.
It has been rough, but yeah, it's good to see that things are getting better.
For some small businesses, though, it does still feel tough. The Yard is a space supporting local start-ups and independent traders, and many are managing shortages and disruption. Rory, who runs this burger restaurant, has always paid above the minimum wage and recently increased salaries, but says the owners can't all be on business.
The high-wage economy, it's a good idea to aim for that, but you have to be realistic about things like the service industry. Not everybody has the ability to pay the kind of wages. What you might find at the end of all this is price rises.
Jess, who sells Swedish clogs and clothes, says Brexit and supply chain issues have proved a real problem. She's trying to shift production here, but says it's not easy.
We can only do so much. We're taking on one person to help us with the production. You know, how are we supposed to ramp up without any support or advice?
It's not that we don't have the skills, it's that we're taking a lot of time trying to figure things out which aren't very clear.
Although it's in the southeast, this coastal community can feel overlooked. So the promise of attention in Boris Johnson's speech was cautiously welcomed.
I think he's got the right idea, because this does need regenerating.
It all goes down to one thing, money.
Doing a lot of talking, but not doing much action on things, I think.
For this Conservative councillor, though, investment must focus on local needs.
We've got inflation on the horizon, so I just feel that attention to detail on local issues is what central government has to do. The root cause of a lot of deprivation in Hastings is our lack of educational achievement.
Big promises have been made about the long term. The first worry for some here, though, is the prospect of a choppy few months. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Hastings.
Gas prices have soared to a record high, up almost 40% in the past 24 hours as concerns grow about the winter ahead. Well, our economics editor Faisal Islam is with me. This is not just a UK problem, it is Europe-wide, but there are serious concerns about the widespread impact this could have.
Yeah, so when you're trying to raise living standards, it's about getting wages rising faster than prices. And as the Prime Minister was speaking, the international markets were kind of conjuring up something of an iceberg for him in terms of the wholesale gas prices. I'm going to show you a chart here. And these are the prices that big energy companies pay for the gas that they then sell on to you. And you can see it going up, up, up and away. And £2.72 per therm, typically it's 50, 60p. £1 is seen to be a crisis. It fell back a bit, it went up to £3.50 because of Vladimir Putin trying to soothe the markets, saying that the Russians would supply more. What does all this mean in practice, though? For now, because of the energy price cap until April, consumers will be protected from that extraordinary rise in wholesale markets, even though the prices have gone up even this month. But from April, what economists, analysts and some industry insiders are suggesting is that that chart would mean a rise in domestic energy prices of 30 to 50%. So for hundreds of pounds, £400, £500, if it was sustained until January. Now, that is a significant amount, the sort of amount that I think the government would have to think about whether they wanted to intervene in some way. That poses a dilemma in terms of the cost, poses a dilemma in terms of spending money to subsidise energy at a time when they're trying to deal with climate change. But it just shows, given the government's agenda, an immediate test of those words and those promises on living standards coming from the gas markets.
Faisal Islam, thank you. Millions of children in Africa are set to be vaccinated against malaria for the first time when the vaccine is rolled out across the continent. Hundreds of thousands of children under the age of 5 die in Africa every year from malaria, a disease transmitted by infected mosquitoes. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has more.
This is a milestone in public health. After decades of research and trials, this one in Kenya, at last, a vaccine against one of the world's deadliest infections, malaria. The disease is spread by mosquitoes, which are infected with the malaria parasite. This triggers fever and, in severe cases, organ failure. The World Health Organization said the vaccine would now be widely rolled out across Africa.
This long-awaited malaria vaccine is a breakthrough for science, child health and malaria control. Using this vaccine in addition to existing tools to prevent malaria could save tens of thousands of young lives each year.
Malaria is a global threat, but around 95% of deaths are in sub-Saharan Africa. Every year, more than 250,000 African children under the age of 5 die from malaria. That's one child every 2 minutes. For more than 30 years, the British pharma giant GSK has been working on a vaccine. And since 2019, more than 800,000 children in Ghana, Kenya and Malawi have been immunised. Trials have shown that it cuts cases of malaria by 40% and those of severe malaria by 30%. But it requires 4 doses, and further booster shots may be required as immunity wanes over time. So it is much less effective than other childhood jabs. But even so, the vaccine, known as RTSS, should have a huge impact.
The RTSS vaccine is a game changer, and it's arriving at the right time. Progress in reducing the malaria burden in Africa has stalled in recent years, and innovative tools and approaches are urgently needed to get the global malaria control effort back on track.
More effective malaria vaccines are in the pipeline, including one developed by Oxford University. Bed nets, insecticides and anti-malarial treatments will also continue to play a crucial role in tackling this ancient scourge, which, despite today's positive news, is far from being defeated. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
A trial has heard that 15-year-old Keon Lincoln was murdered outside his home in a short and brutal attack. Birmingham Crown Court was told the teenager died after being repeatedly stabbed by a group of youths who got out of a stolen car and chased him before being shot in the stomach as he lay on the ground. The 5 defendants, aged between 14 and 18, all deny murder. The public inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing has heard that one of the victims may have survived if he'd been given medical treatment more quickly. John Atkinson, who was a 28-year-old healthcare assistant, lay seriously injured in the foyer where the bomb exploded for almost an hour before paramedics reached him. Judith Moritz report contains some distressing details.
John Atkinson was a care assistant who helped autistic children and was a big music fan. He'd been to watch Ariana Grande at Manchester Arena and walked into the foyer 12 seconds before it was bombed. As the smoke cleared, John crawled across the floor on his hands and knees. A member of the public, Ronald Blake, went to his side and called 999.
Police emergency, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, there's an explosion at Manchester Arena.
Is anybody injured?
Yes, Lord. I'm with a man that is really injured. His leg's pumping.
You need to put pressure on it, okay? So have you got anything on you? Have you got something like a tie or a belt? You need to tie it around the top of his leg, all right?
That the evidence I shall give.
In court today, it emerged that Ronald Blake helped John despite being injured himself and with his own daughter missing. He'd had no first aid training.
Had you ever seen a tourniquet ever used by anybody?
Just like everybody else on telly.
Ronald Blake held on to the tourniquet for nearly an hour, during which time no paramedics came to help.
Others were coming and going and trying to do their bit, but the real substantive help to John was being given by you and you alone then, is that right?
At the time, yeah.
Those injured by the bomb were being carried out of the room to medics who were waiting downstairs at the train station next door. There were no stretchers. So John Atkinson was moved onto a merchandise display board, but it broke as he was being dragged out of the room. He was then put onto a metal barrier.
John Atkinson's family thanked Ronald Blake for his heroism, but it was an extremely difficult day for them in court, hearing harrowing detail about the way John gripped onto the metal barrier as he was being carried to stop himself sliding off, and heartbreakingly, that several times he asked those with him if he was going to die.
The public inquiry will consider whether John Atkinson could have survived. The court's been told that experts believe that quicker medical intervention could have made a real difference to him. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
The time is just after 6:15. Our top story this evening. Boris Johnson closes the Conservative Party conference in Manchester with a speech focusing on levelling up the country. And coming up, 20 years after the US launched airstrikes on Afghanistan, a moment of reflection for families who lost loved ones in the conflict.
Coming up in Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News channel, we'll have the latest from Las Vegas with the Wilder Fury Fight Week bubbling up nicely ahead of Saturday's World Heavyweight Clash.
The ruler of Dubai authorised the hacking of his former wife's phone as well as her lawyers' phones as part of a sustained campaign of intimidation and threat during a custody battle over their children. A High Court judge ruled that Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum gave his express or implied authority for the phone of his sixth wife, Princess Haya, to be infiltrated. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner reports.
Together no longer. Dubai's ruler Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum and his ex-wife, Jordan's Princess Haya, now fighting a custody battle in the High Court. It's been revealed today that Sheikh Mohammed ordered illegal phone hacking during a crucial phase of the hearings. Princess Haya's phone was hacked, so were those of her personal assistant, her security and legal team, and even that of Baroness Shackleton, her barrister and a member of the House of Lords. Princess Haya, in white, fled Dubai 2 years ago after learning of her husband's abduction and mistreatment of 2 of his daughters. She applied for court orders to prevent her children from being returned to Dubai. The judgments published here today reveal the extraordinary lengths that one Middle Eastern ruler and a close ally of Britain has gone to exercise total control over the women in his family. The measures have been described as an abuse of power and a serial breach of criminal law here in Britain. The court heard how agents of the Dubai ruler used intrusive spyware called Pegasus, sold by Israel's NSO group to the United Arab Emirates, to infect the mobile phones of the Sheikh's opposing legal team.
What's remarkable about this case is that it shows starkly that autocrats will take this technology, which is allegedly for fighting crime and terror, and use it to do exactly what you'd expect. They target people who they find to be problematic. And of course, it's not a surprise that yet again, a partner is targeted with this kind of spyware.
Sheikh Mohammed has now issued the following statement. I have always denied the allegations made against me, he said, and I continue to do so. These matters concern supposed operations of state security. As a head of government involved in private family proceedings, it was not appropriate for me, he said, to provide evidence on such sensitive matters, either personally or via my advisers in a foreign court. Mobile phone hacking, the court heard, was also used to track and abduct Sheikha Latifa, one of Sheikh Mohammed's daughters, when she tried unsuccessfully to flee Dubai by boat in 2018.
I'm making this video because it could be the last video I make.
In this smuggled video, she said she was imprisoned in a villa. Recent photographs posted online appear to show her at liberty, but human rights campaigners still question whether she is free. Sheikh Mohammed's global reputation will have taken a hit from these allegations. A billionaire racehorse owner, he remains a giant figure in the equestrian world. But with the court having found that UK law has been broken here, this case poses extremely awkward questions about one of Britain's closest friends in the Middle East. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
20 years ago tomorrow, the United States began launching airstrikes on al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan in response to the 9/11 attacks. It marked the start of the Western military mission in Afghanistan. And for military families who have lost loved ones in the conflict, it is a moment for reflection. Private Conrad Lewis was killed in Helmand in 2011. Fergal Keane has been to meet his parents to hear their thoughts on the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan.
That other country, the place that took their son, is always with them. And they were watching when the end came. In panic-stricken, humiliating defeat.
The shambles that happened at the end is incredible. I don't know how, Western powers, with our joint pedigree and history and military might, could actually let that happen.
All those poor people who were hoping for her to get out, I guess, to get to the West somewhere, and just snatched away at the last minute, and yeah, just terribly sad, terribly sad.
Conrad was Sandy and Tony's oldest child. At the age of 22, he was the 353rd British soldier to be killed in Afghanistan.
What would Conrad have thought of it, do you think?
He'd have been quite angry at the situation. But I think he and quite a few of the other soldiers that I know from that time, they're sort of contemplating what they actually achieved as opposed to what they didn't achieve. They achieved 20 years of hope for people out there. It's for others who've sort of destroyed that at the end.
7 years ago, we went with Tony Lewis to Afghanistan. For him, a journey in search of meaning, and, every day, a reminder of loss.
Didn't know he was here. Bloody hell, son.
Tony visited a school. Back then, girls of all ages could attend. There were 4,000 here, many with big ambitions.
I want to be a very good doctor in the future. I like very much.
How utterly brilliant is she? Her English skills and her ambitions and her joie de vivre. She just wants to live, become a doctor.
Back in Warwickshire, we had news of the school for the Lewises. When a BBC reporter visited this week, he found only girls up to the age of 12 are allowed to attend, and numbers going to school there have halved.
It's a ludicrous state of affairs. And again, you're taking people up to a certain age and then snatching that opportunity away from them. How are they going to rebuild a country when all the girls are educated to just one level?
That word, Afghanistan, What does it mean to you?
Waste comes to mind, doesn't it? It's waste of lives, waste of money, waste of time. But you just have to hope that somewhere in all that is the Afghan people are strong enough to get over it somehow. And how much longer that'll take, who knows?
The Lewises say Conrad died fighting for what he believed in. But they also know now what it is to raise a child, to see them through the joy and challenge of life, and then to see them changed by war, lost to war. Fergal Keane, BBC News.
More of today's news now, and let's take a look at the UK's latest coronavirus figures. The government data shows there were 39,851 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, the highest daily number for a month. On average, just over 34,000 new cases were reported per day in the past week. 6,836 people were in hospital with COVID across the UK yesterday. There were 143 deaths. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. 110 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. The latest figures on people who've been vaccinated haven't yet been made available. Now, it was a relative of the T-Rex, but it was the size of a chicken. Researchers at the Natural History Museum have identified fossils of what they believe is the oldest meat-eating dinosaur in the UK. The fragments were found in a Welsh quarry more than half a century ago, but they've only just come to light again, as our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
It's the closest Wales has ever had to a real-life dragon. The meat-eating theropod christened pendraig, or chief dragon. And this is what remains, a hip and thigh bone lost for years in the Natural History Museum's collection, until they were recovered from the wrong drawer and everything fell into place.
This is one of the oldest dinosaurs from the UK and the oldest known meat-eating dinosaur from the UK. This period was when dinosaurs first started evolving. So dinosaurs are very famous from later days, when in the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, when they really dominated the world. But at this time period, at the end of the Triassic, they were only one of several reptile groups.
The fossils were found over 60 years ago at this site in South Wales, not by paleontologists, but by quarrymen as they blast off the limestone wall behind me. It's taken decades to realise just how significant their find was.
They were all quite small, only about 50 centimetres tall or so.
Cindy's documented discoveries around the Vale of Glamorgan. There were dinosaurs here 200 million years ago.
We do have footprints from a few larger ones, so we know there were a few larger dinosaurs, but we have very few remains of those. Most of what we're finding are these very tiny dinosaurs.
Small in scale, but huge in significance. Pendraig's relatives could also be hidden in these rocks, waiting to be unearthed. Howell Griffith, BBC News in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Time for a look at the latest weather now with Louise Lear. I'm a bit confused by this weather. Isn't it about to get sort of summer temperatures again?
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's the transition, isn't it, from summer into autumn, and we're really seeing all flavours this week. I mean, we had very heavy rain, didn't we? And it was windy, but today it has been glorious, and in those places where it was pretty miserable yesterday. The satellite picture actually shows how glorious it's been right across the country. Now, yes, it's been clouding over in the last few hours out to the west. There's a weather front on its way. It will bring some rain, but more importantly, with the southwesterly wind, that is going to drive up this warm air from the south, hence the reason the change. So at this time of year, temperatures on average should be into the mid-teens, but we're likely to see temperatures around 20-21 degrees, so a good 5 degrees above where they should be for this time of year. It may come with some cloudy conditions, and you can see the cloud arriving, so eastern half of the country, maybe some clearer skies and single figures here, but the cloud thick enough for a spot or two of drizzle, more persistent rain into Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Relatively mild start here to the day. It will be a grey, dull start for many on Thursday, but fingers crossed the cloud will start to thin and break. We'll see some glimpses of sunshine coming through into the afternoon. Yes, the rain fairly persistent through Northern Ireland and western Scotland. It's going to stay like that for a couple of days, unfortunately, but those temperatures probably peaking at around 20 degrees. That's 68 Fahrenheit. Now, as we move into Friday, first thing in the morning, there could be be some dense fog around the central and southern areas. That'll take its time to lift and break. Hopefully it will continue to lift into low cloud, then thin and break up and allow that sunshine to come through. We still got the rain around in the far northwest, but temperatures may well peak on Friday at 21 degrees, 70 Fahrenheit. The weather front gradually meanders its way out of Scotland into the north of England for the weekend. That means there will be some outbreaks of rain around. Sunday looks likely to be the better day. Sophie.
Louise, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.